Hello and welcome to the WTA webinar. This is a webinar presented by WTA's Technology Advisory Board on how to profit from customers' digital transformation. Those two words, digital transformation, are just about everywhere. I was doing a Google search. I think there's something like 7 million hits you get from it from just looking at those words. And it's obviously a subject of big interest. My name is Robert Bell. I'm Executive Director of the World Teleport Association, and joining me today is Randall Barney, who is Director of Certification and Membership at the association. And what we do every day is to advocate for the interests of teleport operators, as well as promoting the excellence in their operations, their technology, and their business practices. Because if we do those two things well, we're making sure the teleports are receiving the attention they need in this business where they play such a critical role. Our webinar today is based upon a report that's available on our website of the same title, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a moment. This technology advisory board I mentioned is a relatively recent creation, just last year, and it came about because of the rising challenges and opportunities that we and some of our leading members, particularly on our board of directors, felt were really changing the nature of the game, whether it's OTT and 5G, it's IoT, it's LEO MEO, which is finally beginning to become a real thing as far as service provision is concerned, virtualization, which has been an ongoing effort, which is now, again, accelerating. They really require a deep understanding of technology innovation on the part of the service provider. And so the purpose of that technology advisory board is to give them guidance. What's going on? What are the most important advances you need to keep your eye on? What are some of the smart things you can do to buy the appropriate technology for the kind of needs that you have? The membership in that tech advisory board is open to the leader and patron members, which are voluntary higher level levels of membership in our association. And these, of course, are companies that develop, manufacture, and market tech solutions. So if you want more information on this or on any of the members who are listed over on the right, you can certainly send an email to rbarney@worldteleport.org. Okay, today's agenda, very simple. After this introduction, I'm going to offer you a few key insights from that published report, and then we're going to launch into a discussion with some extremely accomplished people to explore the many nuances of this very popular topic. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not thank 5 companies in particular for being what we call industry leader members. The financial support they provide to us makes possible our series of research reports and the webinars that we put on. And they are Eutelsat, Intelsat, Kratos, Liquid Intelligent Technologies, and SES. So thanks very much to them. Takeaways from this report. And these are pretty high level, but nonetheless interesting because they're about what happens in the service provision business as opposed to just all the other ways you might have read about or experienced digital transformation. It turns out that it's a great word, but it's really less a plan than an evolution. Companies are stepping into this with their eyes on the bottom line, as well as on the potential for change, for positive change. And even at this point, it's accelerated to the point where even the skeptics now are moving ahead because they fear being left behind. They have a bad case of FOMO. The pandemic, of course, which has been such a difficult thing for us for so long, has also been a positive force in driving transformation to accommodate the needs of a remote workforce, right? Once your workforce is remote, and you figure that a lot of them are going to stay that way, you begin thinking differently about what kind of technology infrastructure you need and what it needs to deliver in a secure and yet remote way. Cloud computing has become the critical enabler of this. The idea that we would pursue digital transformation where everything was on-prem and we had to make continuous investments in hardware and software that was moving quickly toward obsolescence at any given moment, that's really not a working proposition, but the flexible pay-as-you-go access to unlimited capacity fundamentally, as well as select applications that you can get from a cloud service provider, makes the business case a lot easier to deal with. Interestingly enough, the teleport operator community has been pretty quick Well, actually, our report says we're a little behind, but we've been reasonably quick at migrating to the cloud for our internal business and customer service needs, but not so much when it comes to network operations. There are a couple of examples out there of the opposite case from some of our major providers. But that delicate and vital area of network operations, people are taking their time to get there in terms of digital transformation. What stands in the way? Well, what's always stands in the way of change? You've got sunk costs in purpose-built hardware. And you've got software that would need, if it's going to be put into the cloud and be transformed, would need to be rewritten. And those costs weigh on it. And so obviously you're going to run that old equipment and the old existing software for as long as you can until gradually you begin to conclude that the costs of it are higher ultimately in terms of customer satisfaction and the efficiency of your operation than biting the bullet and going to the next step. And finally, there is this underlying thing happening specific to our business, which has to do with the digitalization of RF signals. RF has always been the thing that distinguishes the teleport industry and the satellite business in terms of data communications. Increasingly, we're beginning to work seriously and effectively. There's a number of groups doing this on digitizing those RF signals as close to the antenna as possible. At that point, your whole operation begins to look a whole lot more like a data center or its own cloud service provider than like a conventional teleport as we know and love them. So interesting trends. We're going to be coming back and looking at this again in a couple of years, but those are the takeaways you'll find with a great deal more detail in the report. Today, we're going to speak with some very accomplished, as I said, and also experienced people in this area. They are David Andres, who's Business Development Manager at Santander Teleport in Spain. Stuart Doutridge, who is Vice President for Advanced Technology and Business Development at Kratos Defense and Security. And when I mentioned digital RF, that's one of the things that he is passionate about. And actually, he's founded an association, a working group fundamentally, to begin driving forward standards in that area. Sean McDaniel, CEO of Atlas Space Operations, which is basically a digitally transformed version of the teleport that's interacting with a lot of other teleports to produce some very interesting service innovations. And finally, Scott Mumford, who is CEO of LT Satellite Services at Liquid Intelligent Technologies, one of our leading providers working specifically in Africa and many developing nations and bringing the business practices that they've learned in that to their business as well as to many of the rest of us. Randy, I think you have the first question for our panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So let's start with making sure what we're talking about. What do we mean by the words digital transformation?
And if we get 4 different definitions, I won't be surprised. Who'd like to go first?
Well, I can start if you want. I mean, to me, just to kind of perhaps keep it simple, digital transformation is about integrating those modern digital technologies into your business and to achieve certain objectives. That could be improve the productivity of the company, perhaps increase the profits of the company by adding more value to your products or your services, or perhaps by reducing your costs, or perhaps improve customer experience. So there's a number of objectives you can achieve that, but it's effectively is making use of modern digital technologies. You mentioned, cloud services, virtualized services, for example, or just digitizing some of the internal processes of the company can be set at some examples.
What else? What else is in that box? Anybody else?
So I would say it's the digitization and advancement of orchestration of service setup and the customer relationship as well. I think digital transformation is very often just labeled for the push of customers towards digital services and cloud-based services, but like all organizations, if you're going to truly sort of move in that direction, that includes a lot of your internal systems and processes also being digitized and put into orchestration techniques and web-based portals, and providing your customers access to digital services and information that previously wouldn't have been there or would have been provided on paper reports in quarterly reviews and so forth. So it's a very wide term, digital transformation, but it's to truly do it, it's all encompassing both internally and to the customer.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. It's a really broad range term that can range from software performing more automation where otherwise hardware would do the work, to digitizing RF. What they all have in common, I believe, is a goal to transform the industry into more of a managed services industry. So teleports can no longer operate to simply offer the hardware or access there to, in an analog way. It must offer digital services such as hardware orchestration, data processing and distribution, access to sufficient compute power to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence. And all of that, obviously comes with varying degrees or levels of cloud integration, depending on the ultimate goals of the customer. But it's really the customers that are driving the need to transform, if you will, or evolve into more of a digital platform.
Yep, I think we covered most of the ground. I would just say it's literally everything from, whether you transition over to using something like Salesforce that's up in the cloud and maintained for you, to, what you talked about, where you start looking at digitizing your entire infrastructure and moving to a virtual infrastructure where everything beyond RF is now software applications in the cloud and completely virtualized. And as Sean said, the reason you're going to do this is to provide a better customer experience or drive down costs or somehow other way drive efficiencies. And that's, pretty easy to see that, software is without a doubt always been way more efficient from a easier to deploy, easier to support, easier to maintain, easier to upgrade than purpose-built hardware. So it's what drives the whole cloud, movement to cloud in the first place.
Thank you. Before I ask my next question, Sean, you said something very interesting to me, which is that you talked about it as basically being a driver into the managed service business. And the reason I find that interesting is because, maybe it was starting 15 years ago, you couldn't make money as a teleport operator if all you were doing was just carrying signal, just providing some hardware, providing some capacity. You had to move into value-added services. And so this is yet, I guess, the way I'd frame it is this is a huge acceleration of a trend that's been going on for a while, which is exciting. It's difficult, but exciting. Interesting. Let's get specific here. So what examples would you like to suggest to describe your experience of digital transformation, whether it's delivering operating cost improvements, speed to market, flexibility, other areas, and how did this magic of digital transformation make that happen? And I don't know. Let's start with you, Scott.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, look, this is something that we've been pushing from an Africa standpoint probably since around sort of 2014, and there was a lot of elements at that point that really could move in this direction. I think one of the biggest ones that we found was really the automation of terminal activation within Vsat networks as a primary one. Traditionally, they were always very labor intensive and time consuming, involved a person being on the end of the phone doing peak and pole tests with field service operators, and time spent on a spectrum analyzer to ensure that everything was where it needed to be. And that process in all, as an average at the time, was about a 45-minute process end to end. Now, bearing in mind, in most of the territories we're operating as Liquid, across Africa, that they're very remote. That could be satellite phone calls, that could be sketchy GSM on the phone on an international call, added to the overall cost of deployment to terminals, across the board. We deployed very early, from an African standpoint, the automation of that, with the platforms where we deployed, whereby the terminal certification was done within the Vsat platform. So the parameters in which we needed it to operate in terms of a signal level and peak and pole and everything else was all done within the Vsat platform. That did two things for us. Firstly, it massively decreased the amount of time that was required to bring a terminal into the network. Secondly, it meant that we could activate terminals on a 24/7 basis without the need to having highly skilled staff sat at a teleport answering the phones on a 24/7 basis for terminal activation. It also meant that the networks were running significantly more efficiently. So from a kind of legacy sort of cost base, bits per hertz and so forth, terminals that weren't operating within that range would automatically drop out of the network and require site visits. So obviously, as the number of terminals operating outside of that window fell, we maintained the high efficiency of the platforms, and that kept our operating levels where we need them to be. So it was a multifaceted benefit to doing that. Now, when you tie that into a back-end web-based portal where customers can access their own network, their own terminals, their own sites, they have access to usage, they have access to signal to noise, SLAs, and everything else, and you start to really provide a much more automated, orchestrated digital service just on a very simple sort of Vsat broadband type service, and that's really something that's just expanded and expanded, and obviously as you go up the value chain into enterprise services and so forth, the level of data and level of access that your customers get access to increases as well. So as I said, we all said, it's a very broad term, but there were some very sort of basic things that you could do with your platforms to really increase your operating profits, very early on.
Wow. Like the good old days, right? The good old days, 45 minutes on the phone with the knock.
Oh, yeah.
Let's, David, let's go to you in terms of an example that you've got.
Yeah, sure. I would say one of the things that comes to my mind is perhaps about 5-6 years ago, we developed at the Teleport internally a software tool, which is basically as a web tool to allow our customers, our Vsat customers, to have access to information about their services. So effectively a means for them to monitor, what kind of throughputs and data rates and service settings they had agreed with us, and signal levels, how, what was the availability of their service during the last month, for example. Sort of real-time information, and also the ability to capture some reports over time. And there are a couple of things that this has achieved. One of them is obviously more transparency and an increasing customer, an improvement in the customer experience. But also at the same time, it means having a less number of calls from our customers just to inquire a number, what is my service doing, and can you check this for me, because I'm checking the signal levels, but I can't access the information from your system, so perhaps you can tell me and I can compare it to what I'm monitoring here, that kind of thing. They are very time consuming, and so effectively you could say that a simple software tool like that can both improve the customer experience, but also make your business more efficient, more productive.
So digital transformation can be simple or in its aspects, but have big impacts, which is great from a business standpoint, right? The more complex it is, the bigger the chance of failure. Sean, I'm going to end with you because your business started out this way, but I want to just go to Stuart in terms of an example that we haven't heard yet about, the impact of a digital transformation project on a service provider.
Sure. So I think in the space industry, the biggest area where you've actually seen digital transformation take hold is actually in the Earth observation remote sensing market, where you've seen, just the adoption of digital infrastructure has really created the as a service business, whether that be, started off with, contacts being, mission download and TT&C services initially. And now that's evolved into you can actually have your satellite operated via the cloud on a per pass basis by companies. So, command and control as a service. And that's evolved now into there's companies out there that basically offer a mission as a service. They design, build, launch, and operate the satellite for you. And basically you're buying a data stream from them for the sensors that you had. So it's, and this transformation has dramatically lowered the cost of operating and maintaining an Earth resource satellite, which is, part of the reason you're seeing the mass explosion of Earth resource satellites that, we have over the last 5 years. Coming back to SATCOM, where we see it is, we sell a digital IF product called SpectralNet, and it's been really interesting to see that, basically used in a couple of different areas, mainly for resiliency, for consolidation of infrastructure, and to extend reach of existing infrastructure. And so, and I think the SATCOM industry is just starting on its transition to digital infrastructure. And I think it's not, a question of whether the transition will occur. It's a question of how and when it will occur.
Yeah, well, I think the ship's already sailed. So Sean, you started out, well, you had a great segue there because Earth observation obviously remains a big part of your business. You started out this way. So I guess what I want to ask you is what was the process by which you and your team sort of conceived this different approach to, teleport services as a service?
It was an evolution that started in, I want to say 2006, when our CTO, Brad Bodie, and I first met when we worked at Northrop Grumman. And at the time, it was, cloud technologies were very much in their infancy. Modern compute, as we know it today, didn't exist. So at least in this domain. So we aim to create an architecture, a platform. As you say, it started in the digital, but really with the concept of simplicity in mind. Which really means a reduction in complexity in executing the entire value chain from a cloud-centric perspective, right? A modern compute-centric perspective. So really, the entire premise of our solution set is based in a reduction in complexity, from integrating customers to scaling our network, which helps our customers scale. We've over the last 6-7 years, we've achieved a high degree of automation across our global network of teleports or ground stations, if you will, using a single entry point into the architecture that we call the Freedom Pass server. So we have one entry point for streaming data. We also added multiple layers of translation that reduce complexity to remove, in many cases, the interdependency between spacecraft hardware and ground hardware in terms of satellite to ground and ground to satellite communications. So we have one API that simplifies access, again, with the whole concept of simplicity in mind, through one interface, no matter the hardware. Another thing that's evolved out of this, and I'll just give a customer example, is our scheduling program we call cognitive constellation management. What we've been able to show to one of our government customers, it's on a NASA contract that we have, is that we can predict through the collection of metrics, and we've been collecting billions of metrics over the last 6 years of operations. And I always joke, right? In order to use artificial intelligence, you first have to gather intelligence. And that's what we've been doing. So what we've been able to show through our scheduler is that we can predict with 95% accuracy, and this is just in prototype, right? With 95% accuracy, which contacts, which visibilities a customer is going to select for a given satellite. And we're working on improving that to, obviously to get closer to 100%. But what that does is introduces a whole new layer of simplicity for our customers that if you don't have to worry about constantly micromanaging your constellation schedule, and I'm talking about hundreds of satellites, right? Whatever the mission, right? We can configure the scheduler to operate within the parameters as defined by the customer for any given mission, and then it automates the entire value chain for the customer, so they can focus on delivering their value-added products and services, or their mission goals or objectives, or whatever it happens to be. So kind of circle back to this concept of reduction in complexity. It's done through really having a world-class software team with years of vision to execute on this business model that we've been working hard at for quite some time.
Whenever an IT expert talks about reducing complexity, I know what that really means. It means that it's fiendishly complex in the back, but in the front, oh man, it's just great. Randy?
All right, so moving on, are service and technology providers guiding their customers in digital transformation, or are customers pushing service and technology providers to adapt? And who wants to take that first?
I'll go first.
Stuart?
Okay, so I think as of, I would say, 5 years ago or even 2 years ago, there's no doubt it was a push. We were approaching customers, we were talking to them about how digital IF and digital transformation could help them, and definitely pushing the technology. I would say in the last year, we're starting to see that flip. We're starting to see where customers who've bought some systems are now coming back and buying more systems, but for applications that we weren't even thinking about or even considering as the vendor, where they're taking the technology and going further and looking for new applications and new ways to apply it. As I mentioned before, on the Earth observation side, we came out with our open space platform, which was a digital IF, virtualized platform to make, ground system passes and ground system as a service way more easier and flexible. And, we work with Microsoft and Vsat and others on that, and that's basically taken a life of its own as you see where the industry has gone way beyond where we were initially, our initial starting point. And I think you see it now also with the fleet operators, whether they be the GEO global operators or the LEO fleet operators, where they're clearly pushing the industry for digital transformation. And, they want the adoption of digital IF, they want virtualized infrastructure, and they're really pushing for the use of terrestrial standards to make it much easier to integrate with the, the rest of the terrestrial transport industry. And so, Robert, since I mentioned the word standards and I'm associated and on the board of DIFI, I'm kind of required to mention them. DIFI is the Digital IF Interoperability Standard Consortium. And the whole idea behind it is that once you go to digital IF, you lost the natural interoperability you had with your IF frequency, whether that be 70 megahertz L band or C band, whatever it is. And so to get that back, you have to have a lockdown interface, or specification on how you're going to do your digital IF data transport. And that's what the DIFI organization has done. We've published a specification. We've had a ton of support from both the industry and the US government. So if you're not aware of us, please check out the website. It's dificonsortium.org. You can download the specification for free, And, if you'd like to become a member, that would be awesome.
Okay, and it was a commendably short advertorial, so well done.
And I just want to add on that, from our perspective, obviously we started in the digital, so we had to sort of push our customers to adopt, more of the managed services construct that we came to market with. But key to helping us execute that vision in the very, very early days of prototyping the Atlas Freedom platform were the Kratos products. And I remember a demonstration we did in early 2017 where we pushed digital IF into the cloud for modem processing on their product in the cloud with a live satellite. So that just industry, driving these solutions and showing the industry the art of the possible, and continuing that innovation, working together to push the industry in this direction, is really what's been a key part of our success. So a quick plug for Kratos there, in their innovation and continuing to push that boundary. And we are all over your products and look forward to continuing to push that envelope. But
another short and commendably short advertorial. So no, actually, that was a sincere thanks. So thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I mean, for me, it's a bit of both. I think both, especially when you talk about front-end systems, those that customers have access or visibility of what you're doing. What you're actually seeing is that perhaps, I'll take the example I gave before, just a web monitoring system that provides additional information to your customers that they like. And you can start by creating a system like that to perhaps improve your productivity. Okay, you expect to receive less inquiries from your customers by doing something like that, and offer it to your customers. Give them additional information about the services they get from you. But at the same time, once customers use it and like it and see the benefits of it, it becomes a bit of a loop that feeds back on itself. So it starts becoming something that they will want to have from any provider, not just you. They go to, because they will talk about it, and they will go to another provider they have, and they will say, these guys are doing this. Why, I want to have something like that as well. So it becomes, I think, a lot of the front-end systems can have this kind of feedback, feedback response that can expand very quickly. And a lot of the providers effectively are, they realize that they've got to do something about digitizing or embracing digitization to improve this kind of services. So I think it's a bit of both. On the backend systems, perhaps, where customers have less visibility of what you are doing, perhaps you can improve some of your backend processes. Perhaps it's not so much of a customers asking you to do these changes. Perhaps it's something that you do it by yourself. But on the front end systems, I think it's a both way situation.
Okay, Scott, you're gonna nod. Okay.
Yeah. I was just gonna echo David's comments. Actually, I think from a sort of teleport operator perspective, it's a bit of both. So from our side, it's really pushing the customers to understand the advantages of them being able to use the digital systems that are put in place that enable them to have more control and more visibility of the services that they're taking. I think companies like Kratos are doing a good job on the development of the technology side, and I think but that's not unilateral across the board at the moment from the SATCOM industry side of things. If you look at some of the other platform manufacturers and system vendors, where we're still not a sort of standardized or open standard approach and still very much proprietary driven. There's no integration capabilities between certain platform vendors. That makes integration of front-end systems from API development into those very expensive and complicated to be able to run across those types of platforms. I think also some of the satellite operators need to invest more around some of the digitization of orchestration for accessing of the spacecraft. You know, that's still a very manual system, and you know, manually issued, and the time to be issued, you know, SSOGs, for example, is still quite a process that needs to be undergone. But you know, as an industry, it is moving in the right direction. It's definitely some key elements pushing, some pulling, and I think, you know, from what David was saying, you know, the satellite operators, or sorry, the teleport operators in the more traditional sense of the word, being in the middle and seeing it from both sides, and trying to do that at the same time, managing costs, and driving revenue growth at the same time, which is very complex.
Yeah, it's very complex. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there's a huge variety of a huge range in the speed of adaptation across the technology providers, the teleport operator communities. From a previous report, one of the things we learned was one of the biggest factors in whether or not you're able to pursue this is who you've hired recently. If they're dyed-in-the-wool RF folks from, you know, 10 years ago, it's going to be really hard. We have a question from our listeners that I want to just bring in here. This is one of those catch-all, I call this the catch-all technology question for you gentlemen, which is, where are blockchain, now we're not talking about cryptocurrency, we're talking about blockchain, machine learning and AI playing in the operations that you're either, you know, running yourselves, or in Stuart's case, helping his customers to run?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in there quickly. I'd really like my CTO on the phone to answer this question, so I can have a more detailed response from him post call, if that's allowable. But you know, in terms of automation, you know, artificial intelligence, we use these terms, right? Machine to machine learning, or, you know, for us, it's really in the orchestration, the scheduling of, you know, we're talking about constellation management, but there's many aspects of the value chain where, you know, where we see, you know, the application of artificial intelligence adding value for all of our customers. But I'll give an example to answer this question. We had a customer with a satellite anomaly, and they were working on it for months. They couldn't figure out what the issue was, and it was with their communications and data handling subsystem. So they were noticing it was noticeably weaker signal, and I don't have all of the specific details, but for months they were working on this problem. They finally came to us and said, hey, you know, can we grab the recorded data from your metrics, and we've been stockpiling these metrics for ever since they joined our network, and within a very short period of time they were able to go through all of those metrics and pinpoint the exact problem, and resolve the anomaly. And you know, the very next day the signal was nominal, and they were able to get, you know, good quality data. The point is we're able to leverage customer experiences like that to add value through artificial intelligence, where we can start looking for these things and predict or predictively intervene in some cases from a satellite operations perspective, to resolve spacecraft issues, data health issues very, very quickly. Also to resolve based on objectives in, you know, whether they be performance objectives, mission objectives, scheduling objectives. You know, I need 4 passes a day, or I'm flexible, or I need these exact locations at these exact times. We take all of that information and, you know, using our cognitive constellation scheduling algorithm, factor it into more of a goals-based scheduling using artificial intelligence, where we can predictively output a schedule that will satisfy all of the customers' needs on our network. So we treat the entirety of our customer base as a sort of a heterogeneous constellation, if you will, that considers quality of service amongst all of the varying degrees of mission requirements and performance objectives, et cetera, allowing us to constantly reload, balance the schedule, put customers on certain ground stations when needed, what have you. But it raises the level of customer experience. It can only be done through artificial intelligence. It can't be done manually. So there's an example where when you have a network or a network of networks, right, that are tied into a single unified operating platform, artificial intelligence, changes the game in terms of the level of customer experience that you can supply, in terms of quality of performance, latency, quantity of data access. I mean, whatever your measure and is for, quality support, artificial intelligence is key to making that a reality, and that's been our experience.
Yeah, let me hop on to what Sean said, because this is the key part of digital transformation. As you transform more of your infrastructure to digital, more data is now available for collection and for feeding into these AI and ML algorithms to add more automation, add more intelligence. I mean, the reason Sean could, in the example he mentioned, the reason he could do that is he already had a digital infrastructure where he was capturing the data. So then you could, because you have the data and you have a problem, you can now apply AI and ML algorithms to go out and resolve those problems and issues. And this is one of the huge advantages of going through a digital transformation, because it then enables you to apply these advanced tools and technologies. On the blockchain side, we've looked at the blockchain technology, and it's a fantastic technology. We just have not found an application, at least in satellite ground systems, for the technology where it would actually provide a significant benefit. But since we're talking about technology, one other I'll mention is quantum and quantum computing. I think that will actually have an impact on the industry. I think where you'll first see it is around encryption, but I think it'll have an industry, a longer term, probably 5-10 years out still on other things. But I think you'll see encryption in the not too distant future around quantum techniques that will be adopted by the industry in the next 3 to 5 years, I'd say.
All right, thanks, Stuart. So I'm going to keep moving along here as we have about 15 minutes left. Is there any low-hanging fruit to harvest in digital transformation for a teleport business? And where are the quick victories that can help justify a more ambitious approach in the future? David or Scott, you want to take that first?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, obviously. It's a hard one to answer. I mean, I would say low-hanging fruits where it can be found. If you're new to digital transformation, if you're a company, like I believe anyone that hasn't been involved in digital transformation since it started, that wants to reap the benefits of it, probably the easiest thing would be to try to try to go to small steps, get familiar with it, perhaps make use of some of the digital tools nowadays that help you transform or improve your backend processes. Perhaps that would be for me, from my point of view, there will be a quick and easy access to getting soaked in digital transformation. I'll give a very simple example that is not going to change your profitability or your productivity hugely. But for example, I believe any of us nowadays will have seen, for example, documents being exchanged in a DocuSign or similar platform, rather than having to print papers, sign them in, fax them or scan them and email them. I mean, it's a very simple, but it's a very clear example of digitization. Or someone that is more of an old school company that is not familiar with digitization, small steps like that, it will very quickly make you realize all the advantages of it, and then you can move to further steps, where you perhaps hire a team of software engineers to do something a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think the back end processes and optimizing your SLA and service management side is from a teleport standpoint really is the low hanging fruit. I mean, some of the obvious ones are spectrum monitoring and recording. We use a system whereby every satellite and every carrier we put up is recorded on a digital spectrum analyzer along with a month's worth of data. So therefore, any carrier drops or interference or anything is picked up and alarmed by the system. That removes the time it takes for an operator to be able to see a correlation in a number of service degradations or a specific service degradation and identify that. It improves the mean time to repair in terms of getting the service back up and operational. That's one example. Service statistic logging. Like Sean was saying, putting in a system whereby even some of the base fundamentals like your ESNO or carrier to noise levels are recorded in a system on a regular basis that tie into a service platform like Splunk, for example, from a service management perspective. All of these things just enable you to provide a higher level of service with less downtime and higher SLAs for your customers. So for me, I think they're the real low hanging fruit. If you're not, as a teleport operator, already digitizing the base fundamentals of your business on the back end, you're really missing out from the advantages that come from that, and the operational advantages that they provide. So, but to go whole hog can be expensive and time consuming, but you've got to start with at least the base fundamentals of your business.
Well, let's assume for the moment that we've decided to go whole hog. We've experimented with a few things. We know stuff works. Where do you think in the operations or the business processes of the average teleport can we have the biggest impact? Where are we going to have the big impact on quality of service, profitability, growth potential on the business?
From our side, that really comes from a self-service type setup, like I mentioned at the start. So, all of our Vsat platforms are tied into a web-based portal that our customer base can access. Now, those customers can log in and they can set up new services. They can go in and change their SLA or service schedule for each one of those services. They can monitor their whole network. They can look at their traffic throughput. It links them through to the DPI in terms of what their traffic analysis is and so forth. But you have to have all of the investment side of that from a teleport comes in hiring web developers that can take the data that's generated from the systems via APIs and put that into a front end platform that enables your customers to be able to look at that and control their networks and control their services and adjust their service levels based upon their needs. I mean, a migration that we're seeing, and I suppose if you look at SDN and SD-WAN and how they tie in and how the service orchestrators from those platforms integrate into the satellite networks, whether that be via a Vsat platform or an SCPC link or even virtualized modems, you have to have those back end APIs connecting into a front end that your customer can access easily and understand easily and change based upon their requirements. So it's a whole mixture, but it is an investment in really the web developers and the software guys that make the front end easy. Like you said earlier, Robert, you know, the back end is immensely complicated, but the front end has to be wonderfully simple. You know, because ultimately that's what the customer demand is.
Right, and especially what Sean, that's what you guys just built, basically.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it depends on what your objectives are. There's a broad range of ways you can transform in this way. I don't know if there's any real low-hanging fruit per se. I think the common thread is based on your business objectives, right? You know, it's 2022. There's been a lot of innovation in the last 10 years on automating and making and cloud enabling traditional business processes and connecting applications, you know, across your various workflows, whether it be on the operation side or the back office side. The common thread here is you don't have to invent it yourself. Chances are there's a software company that's invented the solution that you're looking for, and there's probably a software company that can connect, you know, different solutions. In fact, I'm sure of it. You know, depending on what your overall objectives are for your business, which areas in the value chain you want to improve and maximize efficiency. So I think the common thread is seek out companies that have developed the solutions you're looking for, and partner with or you know, do business with those companies to help your transformation versus diving in and trying to set it up yourself, right?
Interesting. Any other comments on that? You know, the where are you going to get the biggest bang for the buck and the, you know, and the difficulty of this kind of work?
Well, I mean, I would just say from a teleport operator point of view, it even depends on what kind of company you are. So it depends on the size of company. It's not the same if you're a small teleport operator, perhaps with different objectives than a really big teleport operator, or a teleport operator that is it's not so much a teleport operator itself. It's a service provider, a big managed service provider company that happens to have a teleport as an infrastructure to provide their services. So the kind of investment or where you would put your money in, I think it really depends on your operation. Or it could even be a company like Atlas, you know, where effectively they are a global they run a global virtual teleport operation. I think that they're very, very different cases. For some, it could be about adding value add services, perhaps through integrating third-party services integrated into your own offer. You know, it could be, you know, voice over IP calls or media management services that you don't have to create yourself. You can just integrate those from a third party into your platform, things like that. Or it could be orchestrating your very complex network that has a huge number of subscribers or remote users, and you need to optimize as much as you can your operation to reap the benefits, and then you make use of companies like Kratos to help you to do that. So I think it really depends. Even not all teleport operators are the same. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, and we all have different objectives, perhaps.
Well, that's for sure. Stuart, do you want the last word? We're coming up on the end here.
Sure. I would say for low-hanging fruit, I would kind of agree with what Scott said. Being a digital IF type person, that if you haven't tried digital IF and looked at some of the things it can do for you, that would be a good place to start. Whether it be around diversity, whether it be around recording of your signals for quality assurance, whether it be consolidation of infrastructure or improving the reach of your infrastructure. But you also mentioned the idea of transformational projects, and I really think that if you look at the satellite world today, the satellite world operates like a 2G world, where you have all these small private networks. And if you look at the rest of the telecom industry, it's in a 5G world. And if the satellite industry starts adopting more of this digital transformational technology, It starts virtualizing more of the infrastructure so that they can start using SDN controllers, so that they can start orchestrating their services, and they start using more of the terrestrial standards to allow, intercommunication between networks and things like that. You're going to see the industry jump from a 2G world to a 5G world. I think that's really going to be transformational for the industry, and it's going to drive massive growth. And I think, the long term, that's really the big long term play, is how do we become almost seamless in the rest of the terrestrial communications market, where today we're seen as special, we're seen as hard, we're seen as unique. Soon, I think we'll become seen as a seamless part of the larger network, and that'll be huge, incredibly valuable for the industry.
Well, thank you, Stuart, and thanks to all. I mean, we at WTA, we are passionately in agreement with you. One of the things that we're going to be doing in the next couple of years is really continuing to push these topics very, very hard, because this is getting down to a survival issue. You're going to adapt so that you can connect into the rest of the telecom, or you're going to be in your little niche, and your niche is going to get smaller and smaller by the year. So we think this is the path forward, and I appreciate you saying it so passionately and well. So we're going to unfortunately have to wrap up at this point. I want to thank our panelists, David Andrus, Stuart Doutridge, Sean McDaniel, and Scott Mumford, for sharing some really great insights on exactly what this term, which is is a very buzzy term, means in terms of the business, and it has a very serious meaning. Coming up, our next report is going to be called Building a Better NOC. It's going to come out in January this month. And it's basically, it's a similar theme, right? As teleport services evolve toward greater complexity, toward higher levels of automation, how does the NOC have to evolve to keep pace? And then in March, we're going to be doing a report on growth opportunities in cellular satellite integration. We all know that mobile is our biggest or fastest growing sector. The question is, what does that mean for teleport operators who have to actually deliver the backhaul service, and what are the opportunities they face? And finally, also in March at Satellite 2022, WTA will be presenting 3 sessions there. One is on cloud technology and services and skills for teleport operators. We're going to also be going into building a better NOC at that event. And finally, ground segment technology for the multi-orbit transmission world that we're now living in. So thank you very much for joining us today.